Welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast, where we're over here exploring the unfiltered truths of fatherhood, self care, mental health, and just navigating the chaos of everyday life. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
This is Amber McCrae with Connection Over Perfection. I'm also part of the Podcast Connection Network. Check out my show and other shows like the one you're about to listen to. The link is in the episode description.
Hello, everyone. Today on the Men of the House podcast, we have Gino Barbaro. He is both an entrepreneur and a family man, and that's exactly what I want to talk to him about today because as a podcaster, I guess you could consider this being an entrepreneur. And if anybody's heard my episodes, you know that I am definitely a family man, and spending time with family and having that flexibility is of the utmost importance to me and why I'm not back in a traditional corporate role. So how are you doing today, Gina?
I'm doing great, Richard. How are you?
I'm pretty good, pretty awesome. And especially better now that we're about to have this conversation because I know these are things that are important to me, and I'm guessing these are things that are important to my listeners as well. And so, today I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and family, the ins and outs of it, why you chose to become an entrepreneur. Is it better or worse for your family? Is the flexibility one of those things? How do you deal with the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur and how that relates to um, your family? Because, how you show up as the leader or man of the family, the father and the spouse, um, I would say I like to compare that role as kind of being the thermostat.
Hmm.
Everybody kind of reacts off of you. And then, of course, lastly, we want to talk about the mindset for success that it takes to um, juggle or balance, however you like to look at that, of being an entrepreneur and dedicating your time to your family. Um, because that's kind of all we got is our
Hmm.
family. So give the listeners a little bit about your background, what you do.
I started out my career in the restaurant business. My both parents were immigrants from Italy,
Hmm.
and I grew up working with the restaurant with my dad. I graduated college a long time back, and I went to college to be a finance major, and I worked in corporate for a year. I sort of despised it, to be completely honest with you. It was getting on the
Takes a
six
special
train.
person.
Yeah, get on the 6 train going downtown to St. John, going down to John Street. It just wasn't for me. I just didn't like it. So I ended up buying a restaurant with my family, and I loved that. I enjoyed it for years, and I thought that was what being an entrepreneur was. Little did I know it. I was just really creating a job for myself. I mean, the first few years it was different. The economy back in the 90s and early 2000s was a lot different than it is now. You could have a small business, you could make enough money to afford a really great upper middle class lifestyle. But then things started shifting. All of a sudden, healthcare got to be more expensive.
Hmm.
College got to be more expensive. Housing got to be more expensive. The Great Recession in '08 comes, and my father had passed away in '07. So I started questioning, should I still be here? Should I not be here? And at the time, I had 4 kids. So I'm like, how am I going to, work more, make less? How am I going to figure this out? So I decided to start investing in real estate back in 2008, 2009. I met my business partner, Jake. He was a pharmaceutical rep in that restaurant that I owned. He was taking out orders and bringing them to doctors' offices.
Oh,
And he
wow.
was having that existential crisis also, Richard. He's like, I'm in New York. I'm just really driving around in corporate. I don't like the culture here. We partnered up, and in 2011, we started buying investment properties, multifamilies, apartments in Knoxville, Tennessee, because that's where he ended up moving. And since then, we've been able to acquire almost 2,000 units. We've done a pretty, as far as I'm concerned, pretty incredible job because this is coming from humble beginnings. I owned one restaurant for 20 years. I
Wow.
couldn't scale it to any more than that. And when I met Jake, it was just a different mind shift. It was a different business. I just saw the opportunity, and we had a great partnership, and we just started buying and investing in multifamilies.
And so that idea was kind of, it's funny you say that because I lived in South Florida in the mid 90s and early
Mm.
2000s, and I actually cooked in restaurants. So I'm very familiar
Ah,
with the culture and whatnot. And I was a healthcare administrator. I ran 2 ambulatory clinics, so I'm super familiar with pharmaceutical
ah,
reps
ah.
coming in. And sometimes you're the guy going and picking up the orders for the doctors to have lunch as the manager.
It's
So,
horrible. I mean, like, there's no scale to it. And when you talk about restaurants, one thing the restaurant did teach me was there's hard work. There's no such thing
mhm,
as the 4-hour work week when you're an entrepreneur. It's very difficult to get to that level. And to be completely frank, if you love what you're doing, you're not going to want to work 4 hours a week. I moved to
no,
Florida in 2016. I could have retired here. Instead, I created Jake and Gino. I actually like what I'm doing. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, I think that's the ultimate goal, to find out something that you really enjoy doing and to try to stick with it and not think of what everyone's talking about online, where let's scale it to the moon and let's sell it and flip it and then start all over. That works for some people. But then after they flipped it, they've got a pile of money and they don't know what to do with themselves. They're not happy anymore. And then on to the next venture. So there's a little bit of a fallacy when we're talking about that. So just be careful when people are talking to you about scaling. Being an entrepreneur is awesome, but it can be very challenging. It can be very lonely. And what you'd mentioned about family, I want anybody listening to this, if you want to have a successful family, you need to treat your family as if you're running a business. It's very similar. You have a family mission statement, you have family core values, you have family rhythms, cadences of accountabilities, same thing you have in your business. I didn't have any of that when I ran the restaurant. That's why I only had one restaurant for 20 something years. As I started scaling my portfolio with Jake, it's like, okay, we've got a real business here. How do we scale it? And learning all of these different strategies and techniques and systems and processes, I'm like, wow, I should be implementing this stuff in my business and into my family. And they're very, very similar, the both of them.
oh wow. That's I've never really thought of it that way, but what kind of struck me in the beginning was, we talked about the restaurant and you had one restaurant and then you moved to these family units. And was it do you think if you'd had the knowledge before, do you think you would have scaled the restaurant and maybe did more restaurants? Or do you think that was really even, I mean, now that we know with COVID and everything that's happened, that probably wouldn't have been the best bet. But ideally, you were looking at you were at that pivot point in 2007, 2008 to go, I need something that's not just going to be, I'm exchanging my time and passion for the
Yes.
money, but I need it to make money while I sleep because you have four kids. Because my idea too of entrepreneurship is hopefully wanting or being able to work with family or kids,
Yes.
even though I know it can be difficult, but to maybe save them the pain of the corporate world or having to go do that unless they just want to,
Hmm.
because it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
But I know for me, I just didn't like it. But was that kind of the general idea was I need something that's going to be a little bit more, but also for people who don't know, the restaurant business is very hard and it's not something you really want to be doing when you're 60 years old.
That's a
Whether it's
great question. I mean, and there's so many different ways we can, and facets we can go down that answer. The first one I would say that really just popped to my mind was my dad. And you were talking about how we're going to discuss mindset later, but my dad, I think, had a fixed mindset with the restaurant. You have to be there. You have
right,
to do the cooking. You have to wash the dishes. You have to prep the chicken. And that's the mindset that I adopted. And it was ingrained in me. And I couldn't shake it for some reason. I don't know why. And when I met Jake, we're like, you know what? Let's buy one deal, how it works. And I had been investing in outside my market. So I understood that, hey, I don't have to be there. I don't have to touch it. I've got a partner who's doing that. And for me, I went into multifamily, into apartments because I didn't want to go into single family homes and fixes and flips because that's another job. I'm just creating
right.
another stream of revenue, but it's a job. It's not creating any wealth. So for me, I think it really came down to separating it from the business itself. The restaurant also, very important. As you're listening to this, you have to diagnose and figure out what your values are. My values when I started the restaurant are a lot different as I started having kids. As I started having kids and a family, I didn't want to work anymore on Christmas Eve. I didn't want to
Mhm.
work on the weekends. But that's what you need to do when you work in the restaurant. You
And
need to
nights.
work when everyone's having fun. And I honestly, and this is not being derogatory in the restaurant industry, but I didn't want to deal with the type of environment. I mean, I wanted to have stimulating conversations like this. No offense, but a waitress is not talking about growth mindset. A waitress is not talking about extreme ownership. She's not talking about investing and personal finance. Their conversations are a lot different than the conversation we're having. So I
Very true.
was stuck. I felt this. I was regressing in life. So I'm like, I need something different. I need to look at life a little bit differently. And then when I started partnering with Jake, it was a completely different business. Although, as you know, all businesses are pretty much interconnected. They're pretty much, you look at one business, you can use systems throughout businesses. If I had figured this out when I had the restaurant, I probably would have had more restaurants. But is that what I would have wanted? I don't think so, because I didn't want to be working on weekends and holidays and being away from the family. So that was really, really important that I found something else to do that aligned with my values.
And when you first went into um, investing versus the restaurant, how did that free up your time? Because I know, like, how is it different with, like, let's say single family homes? If you're kind of an investor or a real estate person, or you flip it, then there might be, whether it's odd work hours or having to show people interested buyers and whatnot, and so you're kind of leaving at these weird times.
Yeah.
Did you face any of that, or was it actually more stable?
That's a great question. It depends on what kind of investment you're gonna get into. For us, I had already a couple of properties before I met Jake. So I was doing both. I was the restaurant owner, and I was also
Mhm.
tending to, residents. I had a threeplex, so I had three renters there. I had a mixed use building. I had commercial tenants there. So you're taking phone calls at odd hours. The
Right.
good thing is it's not full time. I mean, like, you may have to move in a tenant or do some work in an apartment. You can hire people to do that. So it's just the amount of time that you have. And I was dedicating a lot of time to that because I wanted to get into that field. And then there comes a point when you're making enough money in real estate and you're saying, can I leave the business? Can I leave the job? And there comes that point. For me, it was 5 years into my relationship with Jake investing. After 2016, in March of 2016, I decided I've had enough with the restaurant. I'm leaving. I gave the business to my brother and I went into the restaurant real estate full time, but it was baby steps, doing one deal,
Mhm.
fixing that one deal up, stabilizing the one deal. My partner Jake was running the property management, but I was still doing the books. I was still doing the budgeting. I was still doing a lot of the, day to day. But that point comes when, it's very difficult to do both. There is a challenge and a time in any entrepreneur's journey when you have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. That's just the reality. And I was used to it. I'm already used to working hard. I might as well work hard for myself and work hard to be able to build something
Right.
that's sustaining a long term, because the restaurant is great, but I'm on a hamster wheel every week. I'm getting
Same.
paid. And if one week it snows, I don't get paid. And the next week it's Mother's Day week, and I'm making a lot of money. And the next week it's slow because all of a sudden it's Memorial Day weekend. So I was on an emotional roller coaster when you have a small business, and I wanted to try to avoid that. So I saw investing in real estate as one of those where you can start putting capital to work and start investing that capital for the long term and having that capital create a return while that capital is creating long-term wealth for me.
Now, when you were going through this transition, um, this first initial period of, let's say, investing, and you're doing both, how how old were your kids? What was your family time like then? But also, did you was your wife supportive, family supportive? Because I know, like, to make it that 60, 70 hours a week, it requires you to kind of be gone a lot, juggle a lot. And I know that it's difficult unless you have a supportive wife. How was that conversation, and how was the support there?
The conversation was pretty easy. I told my wife, I'm in pain right now. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm afraid for our future. I'm afraid that I won't be able to provide for you. I need to do something else. Now, my promise to you, Julia, is that I'm going to work my ass off. I'm not going to take our savings and just willy-nilly invest it and lose it. I'm going to really put in the effort. I'm going to go out. I'm going to join mentorship groups. I'm going to invest in my education. I'm going to find my partner, Jake, and I'm going to really learn this business really well. And she was really supportive from day one. She saw what I was going through. She was a stay-at-home mom. We homeschool the kids. So I had, at the time, I had 5 kids. Now we have 6. But in 2012 and 2013, that's when I started. And I was still able to go to work at 10 o'clock in the morning at the restaurant. That's when I would
Right.
go in. I would spend some time in the morning with the kids. We would do some homeschooling, and then I'd go to work. And then from 10 to 2, I'd work. 2 o'clock was lunchtime. I'd sit down for an hour and do work. And oh, by the way, everyone's walking by me going, you work too hard. Take a little time. Life is too short. Well, people, when they say life is too short, life catches up to them and they have so many regrets. And I didn't want to be one of those people. I didn't want to have a life full of regrets where I didn't at least try. And that's the thing. I think if you can explain to your significant other and paint the picture, I always told my wife, I want to be financially free. She didn't understand that because when we got married in 1998, she was financially free. I was the one who's the provider. I was the one who's doing the books. She didn't understand that money is a tool. She didn't understand that, hey, if we want to buy a house and have your mother move into the house and I can pay the rent for her and we can go on vacation and I can get kids braces without having to stress about money. That's the real reason why I wanted to, build a business and create wealth. It wasn't to go out and buy toys, and we were on board with that. But once I painted that picture and I sat down and I had that conversation with her, everything changed. And I will guarantee you, if you're listening to this right now, sit down with your spouse and really have a heart-to-heart conversation about what their thoughts of money are, because I'm sure that they probably grew up a lot differently than you did viewing money. My wife came from a single family household. Her mom was divorced at a young age. Her mom made money and her mom spent money. There was no saving. There was paycheck to paycheck. They didn't really value money. They didn't have any, I don't want to say the word respect, but when there's no respect for money, it's just loosely gone.
Right.
I was completely different. I was raised with that investor, saver, immigrant mindset, saving for a rainy day. So when I saw her spending or what I thought was wasteful, it would really upset me. And when she saw that she needed something and she wasn't, not allowed to get it, but we were having an argument about that, I didn't understand the dynamic that we had. So if you're listening to this, have that heart to heart. Try to get on the same page. It can be challenging, but if you have those open and honest conversations and you start planning with your spouse and you start having weekly meetings with them and really make it intentional and really try to create a plan what you want to do with your money, with your life, with your future, it'll make things a lot easier.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it kind of reminds me when you were talking about applying business principles to your family, almost like when you have to have that staff meeting.
Yes.
And in some big corporations, they actually require it. And it's funny because I wasn't always a super fan of it then,
Yes. Same with
but
Jake. Jake was the same way. Jake hated core values. He was in Glaxo. He hates like, I hate this company stuff. And now he's one of the biggest proponents of culture, enduring organization, the core values, the mission statement, the
yeah,
quarterly reviews. He's all about that now. But when he was going in, he's like, this is nonsense. And I'm going to promise you, I guarantee you, we started doing weekly calls, me and my wife, probably a year ago, and we don't stick to them every week, but now we just bought a farmhouse last week. And it's amazing when you sit down and you block out time in your calendar, make date night once a week, have a weekly call about what's going on with the family. Oh, we've got volleyball this week. Oh, we're going to plan a vacation 3 months from now. Oh, we're fixing the house up. Who's going to be home for the guy for the refrigerator? All of these things build up. And then what happens is you might miss something because you didn't have this weekly call, and then you explode. Like you say, what people say is about them. What you hear is about you. So you have to really be understanding where you're coming from. And if you have everything mapped out and you have that foundation and you have that open communication and that open dialogue, it makes being married a lot easier and a lot more pleasant.
how during this time, especially when you're growing and transitioning from those long hours, where you're like, I'm finally going to leave this and full-time this. And I know that there had to be a point where financially it made sense. Otherwise you wouldn't have done it. But when now all your eggs are in this one basket, when there's ups and downs, like with any market, especially real estate, how did you did you get anxiety? How did you deal with it? And how did you deal with it as a couple, as a family, when you have ups and downs, in entrepreneurship?
I really have a really amazing wife because in 2017, we decided to move to Florida from New York.
Mhm.
And I was trying to downsize living in New York is a lot more expensive. If I can move to Florida and downsize. And she said, let's do it. I was pulling her away from her entire family. I needed boundaries. I needed to leave the restaurant. I needed to find myself a new identity. I needed to reinvent myself. And she said, we'll do it. And she said, you know what? If we fail, we can even move back up to New York and we'll move into your mom's basement. And when you hear that, when you hear your spouse give you that kind of support, I mean, there's no failure. I mean, like, I'm going to run through a wall just to not fail. I mean, like, she's got that much confidence and that much in me that there's just no way of me failing. And there are ups and downs. And that's why you can go into the personal finance, have money set aside. But it really comes down to, we didn't really expect and want a lot. So it's not like I needed to make a lot of money. I just needed to make an X amount just to be able to support the family. But I knew that she saw the pain that I was in. She saw that I needed a reset. She saw that I needed to leave the family. And it was probably one of the best decisions we made, leaving New York and coming down here. And there are ups and downs. And I would tell anybody listening to this right now, what pulled me through and what really helped me with entrepreneurship and getting to learn myself and getting to know myself even better was becoming a life coach. I actually went to life coaching school back in 2014, and talk about personal development. I didn't do it to become a life coach. I did it to learn all the skills that a life coach is supposed to have, whether it's an empowering question, whether it's listening, whether it's goal setting, all of those skills. And they all worked on me. I needed that kind of growth at that point because I was sort of stuck. And she would make fun of me. And then one day she's at an event because she's like, what's a life coach? She's at an event and I'm speaking this real estate meeting. I'll never forget it. After the meeting, few people come up, they got tears in their eyes. They go to my wife and they're like, thank you for sharing your husband. What a gift and all. And she's like, what do you do? And I'm just like, I'm a life coach. And from there on, she was just completely bought in. She actually went to get a certification as well. And I mean, she's amazing. She's a better coach than I am. She's amazing. She's a great listener. She's great at holding people accountable. But that's something that if you're stuck and you're looking for some type of personal development, it has had a bad stigma. It's getting a much better stigma right now. But really the coaching aspect of it, working on yourself, that personal development will really help the relationship. I mean, all you need to do is really listen to your spouse. How many of us on this call right now actually sit down, lock into your spouse, and really intuitively listen to what they're saying? Not just hear them randomly or the phone's going off or you're listening to the music, but really sit there and listen and give them the space and don't judge them and just let them talk. Very few of us do that. I don't know why. I was a culprit. But when I was going through coaching school, that one time I sat on the couch and I really listened to her. She's like, what's wrong? What's going on? Are you feeling okay? That's what you need to do. It's really not complicated, but we're not taught these skills. You're not going to learn this stuff in school. You're not going to learn anything about finance, about personal development, about personal growth, about communication, about listening. That's not taught in school. I had to go reach out and find it at life coaching school. And to me, completely revolutionized my life.
Wow. I almost got chills just hearing you say like how supportive your wife was. Cause I mean, my wife is equally supportive and I have no idea where I'd be without her.
That's
But
right. That's right.
I know I wouldn't be where I'm at, nowhere near. I'd probably be a bum. But how also, for anyone who's interested in kind of that life coaching, like you said, you did it for yourself, but clearly it opened up a different line of communication with your spouse. How did it impact your parenting and your relationship with your children?
That's a great question. I mean, it affects every aspect of your life. All of a sudden, you start by reevaluating how you've been parenting them. And the goal of a parent is not to tell their kids what to do throughout every stage of their life. Hopefully, the goal that I'm trying to accomplish is when they become adults, they can go out and make decisions for themselves. I'm trying to create a happy, healthy, safe environment for them where they can flourish and they can actually aspire to what they love. I've got kids who like pottery. I've got kids who like singing opera. I've got kids who like music, and that's things that I don't really particularly like, but they like it. And that's what their sole purpose is. And I think that's what our goal is as parents, to really try to find out what our children's true sole purpose is. Not tell them you got to go to college, get a good job. That may be right for some of them, but really keep an open blank and let them come to you. That's the whole idea, is when they have a challenge, your relationship should be such that they're not on the internet or they're not going to their friends for advice. They're going to you. And how do you do that? It's by really listening, by asking great questions. Not how is your day today at school? Tell me one thing you really enjoyed about school. Engage with them, but you got to listen to them. And you can't always be there telling them. And one last bit of advice that I would say is learn how to say sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Game changer. If you're able to say sorry to your kids and show that you're vulnerable and that you're transparent and that you make mistakes, that's a great way for them when they get older, that they can get up. And how awesome it is when I make a mistake and I'm able to say sorry to my wife. Okay, so now my kids see that. So when they're in relationships, they'll be confident enough to say, hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. That goes so far in a relationship, and that can really change the dynamic of a relationship.
Yeah, I've even noticed with my daughter as I've become more self-aware and done a lot of self-work,
Hmm.
just myself even saying, like if I say something or just act impulsively in the moment, um, I apologize, tell her I'm sorry or whatever. But then I've noticed when she does the same, she's even gotten to where maybe if she wasn't her best self, I can remember her saying, "Tell mommy I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." Even though she
Hmm.
hasn't fully been able to say it herself, it was never even on her radar
That's
to
right.
consider herself a culprit, maybe of the issue. And so, because I've always thought, you know, yes, they're your kids, but they're also little people, little humans.
Hmm.
And the idea is to raise good humans, better humans when they're adults, that they're good people and they go out in the world and they're kind to people and they make a difference and they do things that matter. Um, Not just kind of directing them through, keeping them within the coloring lines.
Yes. And
You
you're,
got to
you're
let them
teaching,
make their mistakes.
but you're teaching them emotional intelligence. I mean, think about it. It's really difficult for a 14 or 15-year-old to actually say sorry. It's difficult because there's a stimulus and a response, as Stephen Covey says. You get stimulated, you get mad. As you become an adult, that response is really delayed and extended. And the longer you can delay it and extend it and come back with a reaction that is not just emotional, that I think highlights the level of emotional intelligence. When you're younger, you see these college kids, they get triggered. Let me tell you, you can't get triggered. It's not possible. Just because I'm wearing a red hat or I say something that may offend you, you have the ability to take that any way you want. You're triggering yourself. So as you get older, you'll be able to understand that. And if you have your children that are younger, they'll be able to develop that emotional intelligence and those responses. That's a game changer for them. They will be able to have an amazing life and amazing relationships with others if they can develop that skill.
So with with your life coach, now, do you do life coaching and kind of investing real estate coaching, or are they separate? Are they one? Is it kind of, how does it work?
I'd like to say they're separate, but they're really not, because I can teach you how to do a cap rate. I can teach you a cash on cash return. It's really 80% psychological and 20% mechanical. So I have a lot of students, and our community has coaching business. We have our coaches
Uh-huh.
are teaching you real estate. But at these conferences, it always comes back to mindset. It always comes back to personal development. It always comes back to fear and overcoming these things. It always comes back to setting goals, right? It always comes back to systems and processes, which has a lot to do with the personal development. Now, for me, I like to play in both, because really consulting is more of what we do with real estate. I'm going to consult you. This is how you go buy a property.
Right.
Do this, this, and this. Coaching is more like, I'm going to ask you a question and you're going to answer the question. And I'm going to keep asking questions. And you're like, oh, I never thought of that. So it's really just letting you have that space when you talk about life coaching. But I think if you can blend both of them in any venture, it's really important to understand, why are you buying this multifamily? Why are you investing in real estate? Is it because you just heard it and it's the next best thing? Or is it because you really want to do this and build a business and get out of what you're doing? Well, let me know what that sounds like, what that feels like. How does that look 3 years from now? And then you start asking those questions, and then you can start developing those SMART goals, as we like to say, because it's no sense in developing a goal to do something if that's not really what you want to do. I'm not going to tell somebody to go buy something in real estate if ultimately they just thought it was a good idea and someone else is doing it. But is that what you want to do? And that's the
Right.
important thing. Figure out what's important to you.
Because it's almost like the real estate could be anything that an
Yes.
entrepreneur wants to do, but the coaching, the mindsets, the systems, the dealing with the adversity of being an entrepreneur is kind of standard, whether you want restaurants or you want real estate. You're going to same
Absolutely.
challenges.
Yes, and it really, I mean, my wife has become a high performance coach.
Hmm.
We went to a brand new Bouchard event last year in September. And, high performance coaching is amazing. It's very structured. He's got a great system there, and she incorporates that, because when you tell people I'm a life coach, yeah, but I'm a high performance coach, it's basically the same thing.
Hmm.
It's just marketed better. Burchard's a great marketer, so he's found a great terminology, but it's the same thing. And with life coaching, you're trying to perform at a higher level as a human. What does that look like? We all want different things in life. So figuring out what high performance to you means is one thing. I want to run a marathon. I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, why? First of all, I want to buy a multifamily. Let's figure out why you're doing that. And then there's certain habits that you need to adopt that'll help you hit that goal.
Wow. Yeah, makes perfect sense. What do you enjoy most about what you're currently doing? Um, Both business wise and family wise, because I'm guessing you and your wife, with her being a high performance coach, you're able to have some of these great discussions that keep you guys
Yeah.
connected.
I love talking business with the wife. We have a podcast together. It's called the Julia and Gino Show.
Oh, wow.
We've interviewed Dr. Gary Chapman 3 times. We've interviewed JP Sears, Michael Franzese, Kevin Sorbo. We've interviewed some amazing
Awesome.
people. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It's a great dynamic. Getting ready for that and having that conversation is awesome. She's written 3 kids' books. I mean, amazing. We're flipping a home right now. Well, actually, we bought a farm and we're renovating the farm for the family. So I think there is really no balance in life. Whatever you need to get done at that point in time, it gets done at that point in time. The kids come to my events, so they're part of my events at Jake and Gino. So they come to the events and meet a lot of the students. I think for us, when you look at it, we don't want to separate one from the other. It's just, I
Right.
don't think we have to. I think it's just, when you enjoy what you're doing, it spills over into your family. I used to be a grumpy guy. I used to hate being at the restaurant. The kids would come, they'd come and eat, they'd come and hang out, but it wasn't the same thing. Now, when I come home, I'm energized. I want to talk about what I'm doing. I want to get their opinion. I want my daughter to help me in an Instagram reel. I want my daughter to do some videoing for me. That's a lot of fun. It's engaging for her and it's engaging for me as well. And we get to connect on that level.
That's kind of with the podcast. My 10-year-old daughter, she, hopefully in a couple years, it's to a point where, this is to become a family operation,
Yeah.
because she goes to an arts academy and they do graphic design and digital art and everything. It Fourth and fifth grade. She's about to be done with fourth grade. So,
That's awesome.
the students write plays, they run the sound for all the plays.
Hmm.
Um, and, like you said before, it's really about, they didn't have art school in 1993 when I graduated.
They didn't. Yeah.
Now they have all this. And, I want to nurture that for her, because I see that's what she enjoys. And I see that
Yes.
she doesn't really care to be a STEM person in science or math, but she enjoys the arts and she enjoys being creative. And so that's kind of what I want to nurture. And um, I believe she's in the right place for that.
That's
But
awesome.
it's taken some time to kind of understand that that was the baseline of what was important. But
Mhm.
what do you think, had you not made this shift? and kind of stayed in corporate, what do you think your life might have been like?
It would have been more regimented. It would have been a lot less, I think, joyful. I'm not a good employee. I'm just not good at taking direction from an employer because when I was there, I didn't have any work to do. I was sitting around reading the newspaper and they would get mad at me. And I'm like, well, you're not giving me anything to do. I can't sit in a cubicle and pretend I'm doing work. That's not how I'm built. I'm not built that. I'm built that if something's broken, not broken, I want to break it. I want to tinker it. I want to add value. I want to
Yeah.
create something. And I think in the corporate world, I'm not saying that a lot of people don't do that, but in the jobs that I had, I just didn't see myself performing at that level. And with the relationships, I just didn't have the vibe for corporate life. I don't know why. I didn't want to be in New York City as well. That's where all the jobs were when I was growing up. I was in Westchester County, Putnam County, commuting to the city. I just didn't like that. I did not want to look back at this age and have an employer say, "Oh, well, see you later. I'm going to hire somebody else at half the price." I just didn't. I knew and I saw the writing on the wall from a lot of family members and
Mhm.
all, and I just didn't want to go through life waiting and waiting and waiting to become obsolete. That's what my fear was.
And when you found that passion and you knew like you were in so much pain that you had to make a change, was that
Yes.
the kind of motivation to, um, you know,
Yes.
some people like when they're at a corporate thing, like you might have a spouse that's like, well, there's no way you could be an entrepreneur because you're lazy. You don't even want to go to work. Well, the problem is some people don't want to go to work there, but when they find
Yes.
something they log on to, they have
Yes.
no problem creating their own discipline, their own schedule, working for 10 or 12 hours straight.
Yes.
Did you find that to be true for you?
Tony Robbins says that you're either moving away from pain or you're moving towards pleasure. And I was absolutely moving away from pain early on. Look at if you're pretty uncomfortable in your life, but you're okay, you're not really going to take action. If you're miserable, you've got to find something out. You got to figure something out and figure it out real quick. I know that I don't want to say leading a sinful life, but I was being a little slothful. And I knew that God created me for something better. I just
Right.
knew that. I knew I had two great parents. I had a great foundation. I'm stuck here washing dishes. I know that I am better than that, but I'm still in the situation. So I used a lot of pain to motivate me. Anger sometimes really works. The problem is you don't want to stay angry for the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
You want to ultimately move towards pleasure. And that's what ended up happening once I left the restaurant, once I got into coaching school, once I got into creating the Jake and Gino platform and I started investing in real estate. All of a sudden, you move towards pleasure and you get energized. And for any spouse to tell their other spouses that they're lazy and all, that's painful. That will actually push somebody away. The better question is, you know, why are why are you acting that way? What's the job doing to you? And let the spouse open up and go, I really listen, I hate the job. I hate my boss. I hate working at somewhere where there's no future. Oh, okay. So then the next question is, what do you see yourself doing? What do you like? Because we can go so easily to what we don't like. Because when I was at the restaurant, I would always say, I don't want to be here. Well, Gino, what do you want to do? Not this. Not a good answer. What do you want to do? And try to sit there and think. And for me, ultimately, I said, I really want to invest in real estate. And that's how I got down the path. And then from there, what do you continue want to do? Well, I really want to help others. I want to impact others. I want to see how amazing it is to have a man and a wife, man and woman in a relationship with children. That unit flourishes, we flourish as a country. Game over. Nobody can stop us. And if I can spread the message and I can show to others how amazing family life is and what a real father and a real dad, looks like, what we do, that's what I want to do. That's the legacy that I want to leave. And I want to teach that to my kids, and I want my kids to leave it to their children.
Wow. I can see how passionate you are about this, which I absolutely love. Because I know how hard it is when you feel like you're at that lost, broken place and you
Mm-hmm.
find something and it's almost like, wind that's been blown into the sail of a sailboat.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your biggest takeaway with this journey that you could leave people with?
There
What's
are there's so many. Richard, for me, we'll touch on this real quick before we sign off, but really it was the book by Carol Dweck, Mindset. It was the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And a lot of aspect of my life, was living a fixed mindset, and a fixed mindset plays it small. You think that you're born with these skills and you can't learn anything. But one restaurant, stay in the kitchen, be comfortable. The growth mindset is, and the fixed mindset says you can't make any mistakes. You can't look bad. I've been doing it for so long. I can't take any risks. And the growth mindset was, well, you know what? You're not born with any of these skills. You can learn these skills. And that's what I started doing. And it's okay to make a mistake. And it's okay to work hard and to learn, but to be patient and to be persistent. I think if you read that book, it's a really simple, description of how mindset plays a role in our lives. You can have a fixed mindset about your health. You can have a growth mindset about your family. You can have a fixed mindset about becoming an entrepreneur, whatever it is. Just start looking at how you view different facets of your life and what's working in one facet and what's not working in the other. And I will guarantee
don't be afraid to pivot.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And don't be afraid to get on a call with a coach and discuss the fears, the stuff that's holding you back, because I'll leave you with this. Everyone thinks that everyone else has got it figured out. You go on Instagram, everyone looks beautiful. Everyone's got these beautiful studios and they sound great and they're closing all these deals and they're making millions of dollars. Well, newsflash, the vast majority of us are just winging it and figuring it out. So that's the growth mindset.
What's your favorite thing about the life you live right now?
Just the optionality and what money has allowed me to do. And money has given me the autonomy to be on a podcast with you at 1:30 on a Wednesday. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at the restaurant. I mean, that's what money allows you to do. It's just a result. Money is just opportunity. Freedom. Yeah, you're not chasing money as an entrepreneur. You're chasing opportunity. And then opportunity leads to more money. And more money leads to more autonomy and more choices. I think that's what I love about my life right now.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Because I think about the freedom I have, the ability, like when we hop off here, I'm going to my daughter's awards ceremony at her school. Went
awesome.
to her field day yesterday, and then had a podcast interview afterwards. And it's that flexibility and the ability to see my wife in the middle of the day, go see my father, see my daughter, attend her events. That's it's hard to put a price on that.
That is awesome.
And that's kind of what I look forward to. And I can tell hopefully other people out there who are considering something, it's about the freedom, not necessarily the money. Like you said, the opportunity that it creates and that flexibility. So, well, thank you for your time today. I think it was a great conversation. I think there was a lot of nuggets of wisdom that the audience can get out of this conversation, especially around entrepreneurship and family, and most importantly, mindset. And I had no idea you were a coach. I thought you just did the real estate thing. So I actually learned something extra about you. And I think that's really cool, but it makes perfect sense. And I had a great time talking with you today.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to head to those awards, and this should be released next Wednesday.
Perfect. Good. Send it out to me. I'll get it all over. I get it on social media. Thank you.
You have a good one.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye. Well, you've made it this far, which means you're probably a super fan of the show. That's amazing, and I really appreciate your support. To keep up with all the latest updates, make sure you're following the show on social media. You can find all the links in the bio. And if you've been enjoying the content, I'd be so grateful if you could take a minute and leave a review. It really helps us reach more people who might love the show as much as you do. Also, don't forget to tell one friend about the show as well. Word of mouth is the best way to help us grow. And if you're feeling extra generous, check out the link tree in the bio where you can find a link to donate. Every little bit helps me keep creating the content you love. Thanks for being an awesome superfan. I couldn't do it without you.
Let's go.
Asteroid of fear.